What's up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of The Imagination. I'm so honored to introduce my guest of honor today, Jon Wedger, who is joining us. Jon actually lives in the UK, for those of you who aren't familiar with him, and where he's actually 8 hours ahead of me. So we're on totally different time frames right now, which is always fun. I've connected with a bunch of people from the UK, and they have such a great movement over there, bringing awareness to crimes against children. Jon has been a huge whistleblower and one of the original whistleblowers, I might add, in talking about some of these harder subjects that I've been covering. Jon's a retired Metro Police detective who specialized in child abuse investigations. He really came to prominence for exposing the deliberate, systemic, and institutional cover-up of child prostitution, and has since moved into talking about and whistleblowing topics like satanic ritual abuse and really all other forms of crimes against children. As one of the original whistleblowers on these topics, he now works to bring awareness to exposing the people and criminal activity that's continuously hidden from plain sight from the general public with his organization, the Jon Wedger Foundation, where he wants to protect whistleblowers and the police and promote justice for victims and survivors of these different abuses. Most importantly, I love that Jon describes himself as a disciple of Jesus Christ, and I think you're really going to see that being evident in what we talk about today. In the work he does, he's really a true angel for these children and somebody who's deeply inspired me to take this opportunity to use my own voice in this movement. So Jon, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you, Emma, for having me.
I appreciate it. Now, one of the things that I found most fascinating about you whenever I was listening to some of your videos was you actually didn't intend, this is not something that was on your radar to do as a profession and career. It was something really that found you. You originally wanted to be a diver, which I thought was interesting. It's so different from what you ended up doing, getting in the police force.
Yeah, I mean, God takes you where he's got to take you. I mean, at the moment, there's a bit of an echo, but since leaving the police, I've gone into construction. I've just built this room. I don't know if you can see, I've just finished building it. Yeah. And this is for a lad that was homeless. And I've spent the last year giving this kid, you know, something to hang on to, you know. So life, you know, you chop and change and you adapt and overcome. I've got a huge passion for the water. For swimming. I love being outside. I love the sea. Unfortunately, in the UK, we've got terrible climate. So you've got to train your body to get used to the cold, you know. So I never wanted to go into policing because I'm not a confrontational person. I'm quite a mild person inside. And policing is an aggressive job. It's a very macho job. And at the time when I went into the police, there was a lot of hooliganism, football hooliganism. There was a lot of street rioting. And the British police, we're not armed, you know, we're an unarmed police force, you know, and we police by consent. So everything that we deal with, you know, they used to give us what they call a truncheon, was a little baton, and it was about that big, and it was made of hardwood. And that was the only protection we had against knives, against guns. You know, it's just incredible, you know, why we didn't have more people killed. We did get officers killed, but the public still had this sort of respect for us that, you know, don't kill a British police officer, because if you do, you're going to go to prison for life. And so if any of us did get hurt, there would be this big team effort. The public would be behind you and the management would back any investigation, and you'd absolutely destroy anyone that really went out their way to hurt a British police officer. So, you know, that was good. But it wasn't my first choice. I didn't actually like the police. I didn't hate them, but it wasn't somewhere where I wanted to go. So I did join the police, and like you say, I wanted to be a diver. And it turned out the police actually had a diving unit, you know, that works from the oldest police station in the world, which was based on the River Thames. And I thought, well, I could become a diver, you know, and then I could be paid for my hobbies, and I'd get all my courses, and I'd get all my boat courses, and which eventually I did end up doing. But I ended up going into detective work, and I loved it. I absolutely loved being a detective. It was freedom, and it was, you could use your mind, you could use your creativity, and more importantly for me, you could work either on your own or in a small group. I don't like big groups. I'll be no good in the military. And when we did our training, it was the military guys trained us, and they teach us to march as a one collective. And I hated that because I saw that as brainwashing. And I saw it as like Nazi soldiers, and that's how I perceived it. So I would deliberately march out of step. And I've got this resilience, something in me. I can't stand being told what to do. I just hate it. But I will follow a good leader. But if I don't respect someone, I won't follow them. And I was very difficult to bully as well, because a bully is someone I can't respect. Now, a lot of people that they would succumb to bullying because they saw it as a form of discipline, and they're being told what to do, so they should do it. But with me, I saw bullies as weak people. And because I hadn't come from a military background, for me, there was a reluctance to be told what to do, where a lot of the lads and lasses that I joined with had come out of the forces, and they quite easily fitted into this discipline background, whereas I didn't. So if anyone tried to bully me, I wasn't like a macho guy and fought back. I used to just ignore them, and I would just literally ignore them. So someone, a senior officer would tell me what to do, and I'd actually agree to doing it, but just wouldn't do it. And I'd just walk the other way. And it started off, my career started off like that. And I found that I could get away with things by just ignoring people, you know, and doing what I needed to do. And I found very early on that I was being pushed in a direction, but I fought against it. And it was, first of all, was to do with drug addicts. Now, they were loathed and hated by the police, absolutely despised. But I would always talk to people, always sit down and talk to people. And I never used to smoke. And I didn't really drink much back then, but come the end of my career, I was drinking far too much and I smoked. And the reason that I am, sorry, I just got to keep flipping these messages up. The reason I started smoking was someone said to me once, if you really want to do well, get information out of people and smoke, right? Have cigarettes with you. I said, why? I said, I don't smoke. He said, you don't, but they do. All criminals smoke. When they're inside, their nicotine addiction is kicking in. And it's you know, sometimes has been as bad as a class A drug addiction. And they're in trouble. And it's called reciprocity. You give them something, they'll give you something in return. And what I was after was information, right? So a lot of drug addicts were coming through the custody door, and I was meeting them and giving them a cigarette, and I was making a cup of tea. Now, this is England. We live on tea, right? We drink more tea than China in this country. And
I love tea every day.
Tea keeps the well lubricated. So, and then I start talking mainly to the heroin addicts, and heroin is a vile drug. It really is abhorrent. And, you know, there's a deeper social question here about heroin. Where's it come from, and how comes it's in proliferation? You know, how comes you can buy heroin in one of the remote Scottish Orkney Islands, which are nearer to Norway than they are to London? You can buy heroin there. How does it even get there? You know? At the same time, I can buy heroin in the city. I can buy heroin in a remote Welsh village. Where's this distribution network come from? When heroin in this country, it comes from Afghanistan, Iran, you know, Pakistan, you know, that sort of area. So how? We're an island, and we had some of the strictest, most stringent customs regulations in the world, you know? You'd be hard pushed to smuggle certain things in here. If you bring in too many cigarettes, they catch up. How can heroin come in? So I was later on to find out why heroin's on the street. Heroin is an analgesic, right? Heroin is a painkiller. People who have been abused are in pain, and they're in a world of confusion. And if you look at the British Empire, right? Britain had this empire, which was only second to Genghis Khan's Mongolian. empire, you know, and we're a tiny geographically, what a tiny little, you know, set of islands we are, but with this influence that we're still seeing the ramifications of today. You know, some people say it's England, Britain is a tail that wags the American dog, you know, and you know, the British took China, right? They're very clever what the British do, and this is relevant to the satanic stuff because everything is sought out. Everything is by design, never by accident. And the reason they took China was that they took Hong Kong. Britain never takes the interior. It always takes the exterior, the ports. And we're seeing this now with the Chinese empire that's building. They're taking ports and they're building rail links, road links into the capitals for commerce. But the ports are what's important, deep water ports. And geographically, you've got to look around the world why some places are taken and why they aren't. It's all to do with water, ports, navigable rivers. This is ancient, but they got the dock workers hooked on opium. They paid them with opium, and that subdued them, you know. And we see it with places like Southern Ireland, give them cheap alcohol. We saw the Germans, they flooded Poland prior to the invasion. You know, in the early 1940s, late 1930s, they flooded Poland with cheap alcohol. So one way or the other, they get in there and they control them. So why heroin? Well, like I said, it's an analgesic. Children that have been abused, right? They're in pain. They're in a world of confusion. They're trying to grasp what happened. As part of my job, when I become a detective dealing with child prostitution and vice issues, was that you would get a lot of video and photographic evidence, and sometimes, and a lot of the times, that's child pornography. You know, and I've had to sit through hours of watching child pornography. And someone said, well, how do you deal with that? I said, because when you look at it, it's like it's not of this world, because it's two things that should never go together. You should never have a grown man and a young baby, you know, with this vile act going on. It just didn't compute. It was like bestiality, someone having sex with an animal. You're like, well, why? What reason? And I can remember one particular image, and it was a church. Now, I don't know whether it was a stage, it was a mock-up, or it was a real church. But there was a priest, and there was a little child on an altar, and this child was being raped. And this child was, when I say little, I mean an infant. And it hit me so hard, and I thought, is this real? What really is going on? And it was such a disturbing image that when I convicted this man and I took him to court, the judge saw this image. And the judge was so outraged, the judge picked up a pot of pens and stood up and threw them at the defendant and called him a bastard. Get that bastard out of here. And for a very English Crown Court judge, you can imagine the pomposity of this guy to resort to such base level, dogmatic, aggressive behavior. It really rocked this man's world. His whole belief system was just like, what's going on? And this is it. You know, this is when you're a decent, normal person, this is what happens. And it's like, is this real? And what we have in society is a cognitive dissonance. We are seeing now people like Prince Andrew being accused of paedophilia, like Jeffrey Epstein, this big business mogul. You know, now you're getting Bob Dylan has now been accused. They're falling one by one by one, but you're still seeing people aren't accepting it. I spoke to a friend who's a musician, and he went, "Oh no, it's a load of rubbish about Bob Dylan," just because he has idolatry. This man is a god. This man is a pioneer. They can't bear to think that this man is putting his penis in a child. Right? We've got one guy, for legal reasons I can't mention him, but this information came from 3 very good police sources. This guy is a king of comedy in the United Kingdom. He's a working class hero. He's in this comedy, this sitcom that's very long standing in the UK, and he's seen as a working class hero, this man. And this man is nothing short of a vile. Sorry about that. Someone's calling me, so I had to click out.
It's okay.
This man's a paedophile. And when I told someone, they said, no, it can't be him, But this is how they disassociate. And if we look at the term cognitive dissonance, it's exactly what it is. It's a dissonance of the information, a refusal to accept that this is going on. Now, I brought up 4 children on my own, and I'm a strong campaigner against single parenting. It is without a doubt the most destructive element, so negative social element that we have. You know, it weakens, it allows predators in, and it stops people really working at a relationship. You know, it stops people making an effort, and it's like, oh, it's not meant to be, I can move on, you know. And then we have this appalling attitude which came over really from the Caribbean islands, and I'm not blaming any swathe or genre of society for this, but it mainly came out, especially out of the Jamaican culture and the music culture, this baby father, baby mother, where it was trendy to be a multiple father to multiple women, you know, and the women would openly boast, oh, that's my baby father for one of my children, my baby. It's disgusting. It's appalling, you know, and men should be at home looking after their children. Women should be maintaining the house. It sounds antiquated, but you know what? I'm not here to placate an adult. I don't care if I upset an adult. I've got no interest. You're old enough. Lick your wounds, get over it. Children don't have a choice. If a child gets hurt, exposed to harm, then a child gets hurt, end of, you know. So they're the ones we should be worrying about, not adults, and not adults' feelings, you know, this right to be offended we're seeing now with a lot of this new political movement, you know, people being offended by a pronoun, things like that. Well, you know, how disgusting, you know, how absolutely appalling. But for me, I understand my journey with God. I understand that Jesus stands by me and the job he's got for me. I'm not here to in any way influence anyone on their spiritual belief system. I don't care. I'm not interested. Right? That's your journey. That's down to you to find out. But none of us are getting off this planet alive. I want to go to my grave and I want to look in the mirror and I want to see a guy that did everything he could to expose evil and protect kids. And that's that. And if along that journey I upset people, I don't care. I don't want to. It ain't in my manifesto to do that, but I don't care. I used to get very upset by internet trolling because I was massively attacked by internet trolling. I've later found out that it was a concerted effort to try and stop me doing what I was doing, which was exposing satanic ritual abuse. So, you know, my policing career started really with sitting and talking to heroin addicts and crack cocaine. Now, crack cocaine is different. It's different in that it's an upper, whereas heroin is a downer. Crack cocaine sort of gives people the impetus to get up and do something with their day. You know, heroin is like the thing they need most. They can't operate without heroin, you know, and they'll see their drug dealer as their medicine man, so they won't see them as negative. And then you try and get into the psyche, why are you doing this? And then you realize, you know, that they are just hiding. It's a masquerade. It's just an act, because deep down they are suffering. They are hurting so bad. And then I started hearing what they'd been through. And then some of them were younger than me, some were my age, some were older. But I was trying then to think, how would I cope with day-to-day life when I start my day, go to school or whatever, after being raped by my father whilst my mother watches, and then being made to have sex with my sister. And when it comes to the more satanic stuff, having sex with animals, and then going to school. and going to school with damage to my anus or to my colon or my lower intestine, being infected with syphilis, HIV and things like that. And no one cares about you. You know, on top of that, there will be abuse and neglect, and there will be general household neglect, not being fed, not being clothed, and being verbally and physically abused. And on top of that, being sexually abused by not just your parents, but by other people. And I started then to have this realization that they're the key to unlocking this. So I need to spend time to talk and find out what's going on. So I started working with the heroin addicts, and I started working with them as my informants, which no one else wanted to do. And one of the reasons a lot of them didn't want to do it was because a lot of the heroin addicts, you know, had contagious tuberculosis. They had HIV, scabies, you know, and they just saw them as subhuman, you know. And it was even more appalling when I started working with child abuse investigations, and the investigating team were predominantly women on maternity leave. And this is where it's all so wrong. So it was seen as a woman's job. It was seen as an easy way out and a way that women could get home money for their children. But the only reason they could get home money for their children is if they ignored what they were there to deal with, and that was children being sexually abused. And they were ignoring them. And they weren't doing home visits because they didn't want to take scabies and tuberculosis back to their precious little angels in their middle-class ghetto where they lived with a husband who was also a police officer. And my life changed because I was a single parent bringing up 4 children. And my income was equivalent to some of the prisoners I was bringing through the door. In fact, some of the heroin addicts had a better income than me. And I was working with people that had Caribbean holidays, that would have home extensions, that would have new cars. My cars, we have a thing in the United Kingdom called an MOT, which is a yearly test on the roadworthiness of a vehicle, which is done by under government license. I would go 3 years without one of these certificates because I couldn't afford to even put new tyres on my car and things like that. And so I was actually living in poverty. So my value system changed. And therefore, I didn't want to go pursuing people stealing from shops, especially like big chain, multi-chain shops, because so what? I wasn't interested. They'll survive. You know, these big supermarket chains stealing meat from them. Well, actually, I don't care. I'm not interested, you know. I wanted to know why you're on heroin. And all of a sudden, from an offence of shoplifting, which a lot of the police officers would concentrate on, which would result in a fine in a court anyway, and maybe a prison sentence if it's you know, an aggravated thing that they're doing every single day and they've had an antisocial order not to go in the shop. On the whole, it was pointless. It was picking low-hanging fruit. I wouldn't know why I was on heroin. So all of a sudden they're telling me that they were raped by a parent or by an uncle who's still alive, which carries a life sentence. So I thought, well, why don't I just deal with this? So I started putting these cases before the prosecutors, and they weren't interested. They just was not interested. And I was told, don't waste your time with this. So I then my life started to change, and I started to take more of an interest in why society was going the way it was. And it was when I joined the Vice unit and we started dealing with child prostitution and the fact that the police had no interest in uncovering it. It had been going on for so long that there was certain areas which become like tourist attractions. There's an area of central London called Piccadilly, very similar to Times Square in New York. All the lights, the neon lights, everything. And it was just a subculture of young runaway boys, which are later to find out that there's a good percentage end up getting murdered in sex crimes. And some of these were 11, 12, 13-year-old boys that were going, and these idiots that would turn around and put their kids in care. They, you know, I know sometimes children go in care because families break down. Again, I don't apologise for upsetting an adult here. I don't. It's the children that suffer, not you. I'm not interested. You know, it's your children that are the primary care here. So a child goes into care and they say stupid things like, well, they're better off in care. Well, let me tell you, no one's better off in care because they get preyed on in care. So what could have been a neglect issue in the home will now become a sexual abuse issue for profit and for gain on the street. And these kids were preyed on, and some of them got killed. And the children started talking to me and telling me what had gone on. And the police knew about this, but yet did nothing, just ignored it. One day, we took a little girl into police custody. She was 14, but she looked about 12, 11, very small girl, but she was on heroin. Now, for an adult to take heroin, you've got the robustness. It's a bit like drinking beer. You know, we drink pints of beer, which is half a litre. A man can drink 8 of them in a night. You could give a 10-year-old, 4 litres of beer, it'd kill him or her, So what must heroin be doing? And again, street heroin is of 5% purity, so there's all this other crap that's in it that, they were intravenously taking. This little girl was doing this. So she was underweight, very underweight. She was undernourished because food isn't high on her agenda. She was covered in scabs, sores and everything else because of her lifestyle, because she'd get more money for unprotected anal sex than she would for protected straight sex or whatever, and if she could get £50 in that one act, and okay, she's at risk of disease, but what does it matter when they're so broken, their soul's broken? No one ever hugged this girl at night and looked after her or tucked her in bed at night. All they've ever done to this little kid was have sex with her or beat her or whatever, so there's a coldness, there's a death already in them, And I took this girl against her wishes because she wanted to be on the street, because she wanted heroin. And so I took her into protective custody, and I was told by a supervising officer, get rid of her now. And I said, why? They said, she's got scabies, she'll infect the car, and the car will have to be deep cleansed to get rid of her. We need that car on the street, and that's you off the street for the rest of the night while she gets rehomed by social services. So that was the generic attitude of the police. They didn't care, but kids kept coming to me, one after the other, In one day, within 10 minutes, I found 3. In 5 days, I'd found just over 50 children that were being pimped out, little kids. The youngest was 9 up to 14. And no one cared, and I had information of others that had gone missing, that had been killed, And I put all this to a senior officer, and I was threatened. It was me that was threatened with the loss of my home, my children, my job. But I stood my ground and I continued to look into it. And over what was just short of a 4-year period, there was this centralized attack, organized attack to imprison me, to remove my children. So and I was told you'll lose your home, your job, your children if you continue this. And that's what nearly happened. My home was nearly taken from me. They tried to put one of my children in care whilst I was in hospital tending to another of my children that was on life support scheme. But what these idiots don't realise is that the more they attack you, the stronger you become. And you get to a point where what they're doing is so wrong, it exposes their weakness, And they take an oath. They take an oath when they go into court. I swear by Almighty God that I will say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. They're lying. They are lying. They are blaspheming the name of God. Every single one of them lies, bears false witness. They have no understanding of the ramifications of what they're doing. The British police force, who ultimately come under the jurisdiction of Her Majesty or His Majesty, whoever's in, the monarch at the time, and the Queen Elizabeth, who is the head of the Church of England, which says Jesus Christ is their Lord, their Saviour, yet the thing is a lie from the top right down to the sewer, and the whole thing is a lie. And once you understand that, you get it in your head that these people don't care. They're part of cover-ups. The children were telling me of magistrates from the courts that were involved. I was later to hear of Crown Court judges that were raping the children. I was to hear of politicians, senior police officers And it was later I was to hear that one of the senior officers that was in charge of the unit that I was on was an active Satanist. So I'm going to get on to the Satanism. And what you got to realise is that anyone who sexually abuses a child is doing the devil's work. Whether they do it willingly or not, it's relevant. What they're doing is an act of pure evil, you know. So, I stood my ground and I fought this horrendous campaign to clear my name, to get my pension and to divest myself from the police force, of which I no longer had any confidence in, you know. And also no one really, apart from two good colleagues, stood by me, two colleagues out of the hundreds I've known. They all ran and hid, you know, and they shut down any investigation into child prostitution. So when you get New Scotland Yard as being like the benchmark of decency in policing for the world, it's just a lie. It is a massive monumental lie, because they're not decent and they are failing to police those that need it the most, which are the children. But society in general does. But you get people that they just don't want to hear it. Now there's a famous philanthropist called Edmund Burke, and he says something very poignant. And he said, in order for the triumph of evil, it takes but for good men to do nothing. And that's so true. So it's not the antagonists, you know, that really cause the problems, because we know who they are, we know what they do. It's people who sit there in their comfort and do nothing. They're the problem. They're the massive problem. And they just don't want to hear it. I can't even have this conversation with any of my family. One of my sisters, when I told her, she just turned around and said, I don't want to hear this, it's a load of shit. You know, and so it's incredible, you know, how people switch off, but we are fighting spiritual warfare. So as much as I wanted away from the children, they kept finding me, you know, they kept finding me. Now, I had a defining moment in my life, and that was in 2016, when I was in the centre of this persecution against me. My life, I had no income, none whatsoever. My house was looking at being taken off me by the bank. And this is how great God is, you know, how things can turn around. I've got my children at home. I was every night frightened that I would go to prison. There was 9 cases pending in the Crown Courts to have me prosecuted. My job was going to go, you know, I couldn't afford to put petrol in my car. In the middle of that, one of my children was involved in a life-changing and catastrophic accident. He initially was pronounced dead. They got him back. He was taken to hospital. There was an emergency operation, and he spent the next few months in intensive care. And he was always on a thin knife edge whether he was going to make it. One evening, I get a call from the hospital after spending the day there, and the hospital was many miles from my home. So I couldn't even afford to drive there with the petrol. I became a blood donor, which meant I could park my car in the blood donors bay, because in the UK, all our hospitals are privatised with parking. So it could cost you £20 a day just to park a car, which years ago it used to be free, you know, so I couldn't even park my car. Anyway, you know, so I get to hospital and there's 3 consultants to tell me that one of my children, well, the boy that was in hospital, sorry, had died. He'd been dead for 10 minutes. They'd worked on him for 7.5 minutes, and they said, look, no, unfortunately, we've lost him. However, they've got an algorithm back from the brain, and there is slight heart murmur, so he's on full 100% off support. But with that, means 100% ventilation, because his organs had stopped. You know, this is going to, if he gets through it, it's going to be so badly brain damaged and so badly paralysed that there's no quality of life. So I've lost him in essence. So it's just a matter of waiting 5 days for them to turn off the life support machine, on top of everything else that's going on. So I was at a very low point. But it's strange what happens when you're there, because you don't actually think about yourself or anything. You just survive. It must be like, I would imagine, being in a third world prison, being tortured, because you just get through it. You just put up with it and get through it, and you worry about it later because you're in survival mode. And there was a chapel in the church, and the UK, because we're an ex-colonial, nation, and we get a lot of doctors that come from all over, the colonies. And there was Indonesian doctors, there was African doctors, there was Filipinos, there was everything. So it was a multi-faith chapel. So there was Hindu doctors there praying from India. There was Indonesian nurses that were doing their little thing to Allah. And then there was the altar for those. And I've never seen so many different Bibles. So for 3 days, I just prayed. I prayed and I read the book of Matthew and I read the book of Psalms. And they really stood in my mind, the book of Matthew, it really got me, And I was reading Psalm 34, the Lord's my shepherd, really hit home to me, And I kept reading. And then one day, it was the third day, so I've got 2 days left with my son, and I hadn't gone home, I stayed there. And I got angry with God, I got so angry with him. And I turned around and I said, look, I'm not helping children. I said, look what it's done to my family. And I believed that I was cursed. I believe my son was cursed. This was the devil's way of getting back at me for what I was doing. And I was up against evil, and now they're hurting my children. And I realized how the devil works. It hurts the children. The devil hurts the children. Anyone who hurts the children is doing the devil's work, They can say what they want. They can say they were abused as a child. Actually, it doesn't matter to me. You chose to do it. They don't have a choice. So I said, don't expect me to help any children. I'm not doing it. Why should I have children that other parents, adults, can't be bothered to look after? They've probably got more income than I have anyway. I'm not doing it because they can't look after their children. That's their problem, not mine. If you can't give me my son, you ain't having me. And I said, you leave me alone. I don't want to know. And I turned my back on God, and I laid it on the line with God. I know people say you can't do it, but I was angry, Why are you hurting me? My life has been nothing but servitude to children, I couldn't get married, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't go on holiday, I couldn't do anything because I was just at home with my children and working, And it was hard. It was very, very hard, And I went back, but my son woke up. When I went back, I prayed, and he woke up. He opened his eyes. And he had pipes everywhere, in his mouth, all sorts. He had a thing in there, tracheotomy, and it was just horrendous. And I told him, I said, son, I love you. And he moaned, you could see him mithering the words back, I love you, Dad. And I just said, just move your fingers. And he moved his fingers. And I said, move your toes. And his toes moved. And I knew he wasn't paralysed. And I thought, God, you're great. God, you're great. And I drove home. And as I drove home, it was night. It was getting dark. So I was shooting stomach straight across my car. And boom, right across my car. And when I got home, I thought we can move forward. As I got home, there was 2 policemen there, and they arrested me. They arrested me for neglect of my 16-year-old boy who was at home with my 26-year-old boy. And that's what they did. And they were sent there by the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, a woman called Cressida Dick, vile, horrible woman. So there is nothing that evil, when you're on the floor, it will stamp on your head, and this is what it does. But I sort of expected it, but there was nothing more they could do to me, and all the cases against me were dropped. And my message to anyone is you never give up. While you're breathing, you're still fighting. You must never, ever give up. No matter what they do to you, you keep going. While you still have breath, that means you can still move, you can still fight, you can still think. You keep going and stay away from medication. Anything that alters your mind, stay away from it because you can't think straight then. You need to have clarity, and it says in the Bible, you need to be sober in the last days because this is when the weakness comes and they'll have you. And the devil's always looking for a weakness, always. And it has no mercy. You know, I thought that when things got bad, there'll be the hand of God would cradle me, right? But no, all it was the devil stamping on my head on the floor. That happened. You know, God came because it was me that turned around and said no more. He showed me the way, and it was down to me to say, I'm not having this. And God's with you all the way, you know. So when people sit there and think, well, why God's come? Well, he's there already. You've just got to do it. You've got to show your side of it, your effort as well. And that changed. And I started then gaining ground back. I started winning my cases in the court against the police. I started winning this and winning that. But I started then meeting up with more victims and survivors of child abuse, and a lot of ex-criminals. So a lot of ex-criminals were coming to me, and they started telling me that, you know, they went into crime because that's all they had. They survived because they were abused. They were sexually abused. And in the 60s, the 70s, in the UK, there was a lot of children's homes. A lot of children were just put into care. And it's all about money. The whole thing's about money. You've got to get this right. Crime and dysfunction is all to do with money. Right? It's at the center of everything. You know, even Satanism comes down to money. You know, the worship of money. And it's what they call Baal worship, you know, and that comes into the demonology, comes into it. So, you know, I started working with one guy in particular who spent his younger life in prison, street kid, you know, and he's a grown man now. And me and him just got on so well. And then we started putting the word out there and speaking out. And one day he said, you've got to talk about satanic abuse, John. You need to. And I was frightened to, because it was going to take me into a world of ridicule. You know, it was then going to bring a spiritual element to it. And I'd just come out of this battle with the police, and I don't know whether I was prepared for this battle against Satan, but I realised I'd been battling Satan all along anyway. It was just a realisation that what all it was before was a veneer. I've now peeled that veneer back, and I'm now into the real nuts and bolts of how this machine works. I'm starting to understand it, and you can't understand how the world works until you understand Satanism and demonology. You can't, because the system is just dirty, and it always has been dirty.
What was it that introduced you to satanic ritual abuse? Because that's a term most people still don't know to this day. You had found out about it. I know you did investigations. Did that term exist back then, or was that something being created as you were learning about it?
I had dealt with some stuff that sort of inferred on witchcraft. The main thing with police investigations was with the Jamaican and the Congolese communities, right? And it was voodoo. So we dealt with real cases of voodoo. Jamaica, there's a thing called opia, right? O-P-E-A. And it's like Santeria. It's this bastardization of Christianity and voodoo. You can't mix the two. I mean, it's like oil and water, but it was a way of worshipping voodoo under the guise of Christianity, because the slaves would get beaten if they were caught worshipping, you know, or even speaking their native languages. And of course, the slaves had come from West Africa, from Ghana, Benin. If you go to Benin now, Benin is this West African country, very small, ex-French colonial country. And it's, I think, 20% of the population still practice as their first religion voodoo. However, 80% indirectly do. So what they do is they're Christian, they're Catholic, but they'll still go to a witch doctor, and they'll still go to a juju man, you know, when there's a problem, as well as to the church. And sometimes the churches and the juju men occupy the same building, right? So, you know, and these are the countries that were the predominant supplier of slaves, The slaves then were taken over to the colonies. The main ones was the Caribbean islands for the sugar cultivation and for the hardwood. Some were taken down to sort of Cuba and Brazil. So you got Santeria, which came out of, you know, the Southern Caribbean and Cuban islands and Haiti. And then the British colonies, it became opium. And it's still practiced now. And what I found is organised criminals are very much involved in witchcraft. It's the same thing, whether it's the witches that we get over here, the paganist sort of witches, or whether it is the ex-colonial belief system, it's the same thing. I mean, one of the gods that they worship, there's 9 demons, right? 9 main, apart from Lucifer, under Lucifer is 9 high gods, whatever they're called. And they've all got different names like Baal, Azazel, Paimon, Leviathan, you know, and these are biblical names as well, Moloch. You know, you pick up the Bible, these are names in there, but in Africa, you know, they've got the god Mami Water, right, which is Leviathan. It's a serpent. It's a powerful marine spirit which controls vanity. It controls the cosmetic industry, the film industry. Baal controls the financial institutions and the judiciary. So they've all got their job, and depending on what you need, it depends on what god that you'll go to. And in the same in Santeria, they call them the Oshons, and they've all got different jobs to do, you know. And you could go on YouTube and watch a program on voodoo in New Orleans, for example, and they'll turn around and say what benevolent. It's just our ancestors that we're calling on and all that, but it doesn't work like that. It never has done. It's just the human face of it. It's a lie. It's a lie, and the devil's a liar. As Christians, we worship a living God. They don't. It's necromancy. They call on the dead. You know, they go to the second heaven, which is full of deception and lies, and it ends in death ultimately. Anyway, I started getting people coming to me that had been ritually abused, and there was a marked difference in the victims. When you got victims of the children's homes, the perversion, the British back then were very much into beating children with sticks, caning they called it. It still went on in we call them public schools. We're the only country that does it. Our public schools are actually very high fee paying schools, right? So it's not for the public. They only call them public schools under the Public Schools Act, where every education place had to be made available to someone from the working classes. But we got schools like Eton, which is where Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Tony Blair, all these came from. Very high fee paying schools. You know, if you ever watch any of these films about old England and Winston Churchill and that, it's always these big palatial boarding schools. And they were the last ones to abolish caning. There was another thing called the fagging system. Fagging was where older children had responsibility for the lower children. So the more senior children in the school, we're talking teenage boys, you know. So a 14-year-old, he could be given the responsibility like a prefect over the 8-year-old boy that had just come in. But what that meant, also they had responsibility for discipline. So they were allowed to cane them, right? And these are very twisted people. So they could cane them with all their might. Can you imagine an 8-year-old boy having his bare bottom whipped with a thin stick as hard when you buy a 14-year-old boy who plays a lot of sport and will be very angry because he would have been possibly sodomized and beaten himself, most possibly, you know. And what's that going to do to the mind? It's going to twist it. And I had a member of the aristocracy who went to Eton, and he told me that the fagging system in Eton is nothing more than a rent boy racket, you know. And so you know, just Google these things, call it public school UK fagging, and you'll see the atrocities that went on, you know. And it was no different to the sexual abuse that went on into the care homes as well, very similar. You know, and you take schools like Eton, these boys that are divested from their mothers, ages of 4 and 5. You know, they are then placed into boarding schools where it's a strict regime, a Christian-based regime, but there is harsh punishment, very disciplined, and then sexual abuse starts when they go to these long-term boarding schools at the age of like 8 onwards, you know. You know, when you talk to the survivors, the reality hits you. Now, for me, it wasn't so bad because I'd worked in child abuse for many years, and there's nothing really that would shock me. You know, I've seen some appalling things. I've heard some appalling things. So words will never really harm me. I don't really care what people say. I don't get offended by swearing. I don't, you know, the working class people swear. You know, I know it's not right to swear, but some people take umbrage with it. For me, I'm not bothered. I pick up people's intestines. I picked up people's brains. I've seen the most appalling images and the most shocking testimonies. So there's, you know, there's not much that really hurts me. You know, so it was really there's a strength that got me through what I was yet to encounter. But the survivors of this sort of abuse were very angry. A lot of them become self-employed because they couldn't maintain a job, because they couldn't be told what to do. But there was another reason a lot of them become self-employed. And this really needs to get out there. You know, they couldn't keep a job down because they would defecate themselves. They would shit their trousers, their pants, their skirts, because they had years of sodomizing. And it caused the anus to be ruptured and damaged beyond repair. Some of them had ruptured bowels. Some of the girls could never have children because their wombs were misaligned. A grandma's penis had gone into such a small young girl's vagina and just done so much damage. A lot of them got back pain because the penis going in there was damaging the spine. So can you imagine what they must have gone through? There would have been no nurse. There would have been no one comforting them at night. Blood would have been coming out of them, their backs, you know, and then if they said anything, they were caned. And this went on. I know one girl who went to the school headmaster to say that she had just caught one of the teachers raping a 6-year-old class friend, right? Holding the 6-year-old girl, a teacher was doing it. And do you know what they did to this girl, the informant? They put her in a mental institution and she was interned for life. She escaped and she got married and she never went back. She's still at large. She's in her 70s now. She escaped when she was 15. She climbed out the window, but she was going to be there for life. And what was her crime? You know, telling the truth. So when we get these politicians say, we want 3 things, I will say, you know, transparency. I can't remember now. There's 3 of them. They'll come to me in a minute. The police are all saying it. And if they ever had transparency, the truth and integrity, the whole system would collapse. People just wouldn't believe it anyway. You know, they just wouldn't believe it. And so you saw that these people were damaged with anger. They were the ones that had a propensity to do alcohol, have dysfunctional families, be very aggressive, you know, and then a life of crime comes with that, antisocial behaviour, drug misuse. And we see this in a lot of our inner cities, you know. They higher up the food chain, they will then go to military academies, such as in the UK we have Santos, become officers, and then go into the financial institution or become military officers, where we see history is written by these monumental military failures. You know, the First World War is a main one. They called it, you know, lions led by donkeys, you know, where decent working class people were led by these dysfunctional, totally screwed up officer class because they've come from such a traumatic background. But they, again, they're a leader. They will have no sympathy because it was buggered out of them. It was beaten out of them. So why should I have sympathy? And they call it the stiff upper lip in England, you know, but it's not, it's psychopathy, you know, that's what it is. It's not a stiff upper lip, oh boy, and get on with it, you know, take one for the regiment. Psychopathy. These are people that are totally devoid of any sympathy because they were abandoned at an early age and then it was beaten and raped out of them. So you see this, and you know, my heart goes out to a lot of these that have gone into prison and all that, because there isn't the help. In the UK, and I think the US is very similar, we have an 80% recidivism reoffending rate, 80%. Scandinavia, however, has an 80% non-offending rate because they get to the core of the reason for offending, and it's always child abuse. Let me tell you now, you know, you've got to look at how people hold themselves, what they do to themselves. Body piercing is pain, is self-harm, which comes from abuse. Tattooing, again, is disfiguring yourself. You know, many things, overeating, you know, because that's a comfort. Where, you know, what do children do when they're frightened? Hide under their blanket. This layer of fat is your comfort blanket. And alternatively, eating disorders such as anorexia, a reluctance to put anything in your mouth. Why would someone want to put something in their mouth? Because something was put in their mouth they didn't want in there. So you start understanding it, and you start looking at these celebrities, especially when you're looking at these rap artists. I look at them now and thinking, you were sexually abused, my friend. Yeah, tattoos on their face and piercings and this. And they're talking all tough. I'm thinking, man, I know who you are. I know what you're from. You're in pain, you know. And I see it now. And that's a mixture of doing profiling and working with them in the police, but also mainly working with people since I've left the police and really getting into their heart and them telling me what they went through and why they become angry. But then there was a different category, and these were people with what they call DID, dissociated identity disorder, mind-controlled, multiple personality individuals that have been satanically abused. And that took my life into such a darker place. And I was then led into the reality that is satanic ritual abuse. And SRA survivors are controlled not to speak. They're also programmed not to let you expose the truth. So they will sabotage things. They don't know they're doing it, but they will do. You know, one way or another, they will really go for it. They will really try and do their best to stop you, you know, getting them better or exposing what's coming out. And they can't help it. And you've got to look at what happens to this mind. Why is it like this? I know one woman, she's got 100 personalities and they've all got names. And this isn't schizophrenia. It used to be called multiple personalities. And these are their own little characters in their own right. And so the names will reflect their reason for being, right? Their raison d'etre. Why is that altar, they call them? Why is that altar there? Now, what Satanists like to do is they like to be God. And like the devil says, I will be like the Most High. And what does God ultimately have? He has a power of life and death. That's why you see a lot of Satanists in the medical industry, you know, anaesthetists and things like that. They have the power over people's lives, you know, and many others. You've got a lot of CEOs of companies that have got incredibly narcissistic and psychopathic tendencies, you know. So when with a child, it's a hatred for humanity. Children are the essence of everything that is beautiful, you know. They are born angels and they have to be defiled by this world. And that's what the Satanist job is, to defile anything that is of God, you know. So they'll, you know, the first things we do to children is we inject them, we do this to them, we do that to them, you know. You know, if we needed all these things, then how comes we still got indigenous people? We don't have anything, you know. It's just, the whole thing is a lie, but they defile them. And their job, a Satanist job, is to impart a demon into the child. And the easiest way to do that is through sex. When people engage in sex, what they're doing is they're soul tying. They're soul tying. And that stays with you for the rest of your life unless you cut them soul ties. You've always been connected to men that are always going with prostitutes. I was talking to a guy the other day, a colleague from the police. He's had sex with 400 prostitutes. He would have a soul tie to every one in 400. So a lot of them prostitutes would have come from abuse, you know, harm or whatever. He's got a connection to all of them. And what's that doing to his, you know, his well-being, his soul, whatever, you know. So demons occupy the second heaven, right? They can't incarnate, but they need a home. They need a home, right? And it's all contractual. Everything's about, that's why sometimes God doesn't intervene, because it's down to us. We've got free will. So God has to give the devil, give evil free will as well, you know. It seems unfair, but it's their choice, you know. And anyone who harms a child, you know, they're going to pay such a poor price. It's going to be so, they have no idea. They think they get away with it in the court system because the court system is just biased and corrupt and twisted, and especially when it comes to anything that's sexual, right? And they think they're getting a result, but we're all going to die. There ain't one person getting off this world alive, you know. I would not like to be any of them on their deathbed. They are not winning when they do it. So when they have sex with them, they impart a demon, they give a demon a home in that child, right? And there can be multiple layers and layers of demons in there, you know. And you've got to read it, you know, in the Bible about legion, you know, for we are many. So it's not just one. And when there's a deliverance, it's always a weak demon that comes out first. The others occupy it. And the other thing is play life and death. So they will torture a child to the point of death. So they would drown a child, right? They would drown them. And a lot of them are experts at revival, you know, CPR and mouth-to-mouth. There's very infamous child murderer in the UK, and he was meant to be like an expert in CPR because he would strangle while sodomizing the young boys. And then because that gave him a bigger thrill, because ultimately they'd be having sex with while they were strangling, but then he would revive them so they could be used again. You know, so children are a commodity, so they can get used for many, many things. Children that are intergenerational will survive. Children that are abducted, they don't survive, you know, they die. You know, and blood is very important in Satanism. Blood is the life force. Semen as well, right? Very, very important, because it carries DNA, it carries the life force with them, and they can tune into that, you know. And I don't care what people believe, but this is a spiritual war, and they work in the spirit. The battle is in the spirit realms, you know. So if a child is drowned and it keeps happening, the child can't cope with that. They know what's going to happen, and they'll torment them. They'll know. One girl, her father would take her to the swimming baths, to the swimming pool, and he would deliberately drown her while people weren't looking. And she knew that every week she was going to have to be subject. So she would alter it. She would then add this character that would be to do with the water. So we're given a very childish name, like Splashy or something like that. And that alter will be able to cope and would disassociate. So the moment she went in there, this altar would take over. And so she could be, her mind could be put at rest. So it's a survival thing. The other thing they do is they electrocute children. One girl had telling me about one of her altars, it's called Sparky. So when she knew she was going to get it, they would electrocute their genitals. Can you imagine the pain? The 240 volts of alternating current onto the genital. She knew it was coming, and she couldn't cope with it. And they would bury them, you know. Try one day laying under a duvet and put it over you, and imagine that that is a solid bit of concrete, and you can't move, and it's pitch black. Within seconds, you go mad with claustrophobia and a sense of hopelessness. They would keep them there over a weekend. And so they would switch off. So there'd be another character. And they'd do all these, and they would make them eat feces, you know, urinate on them, make them eat slugs, spiders, put them in the mouths, all things like that, you know. And then I realised there was so many of them. And what do you do with them? And so I started talking with therapists, how do they work with them? And what they've got to do is they've got to bring forward each altar, and they've got to show the adult and say, look, she's safe now. It's time to let go. Because the altar's only there for the child. And they stop. They stop at that age. Emotionally, they stopped at that age. So anyone who's been sexually abused, emotionally, they stop at the age they were abused. That's why you get people in relationships doing the most childish things, cutting up people's clothes and really these mind games that couples play. Why they do them? They do them because they're going into their emotional stunted state of survival, which was when they was hurt. And hurt people hurt people. So you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you even more. And it will be the child, the broken child, that will be doing it. So this is when you'll see them stabbing tires on a car and scratching their key, or ringing up their friends and saying, she did this with that man, and because it's childish, because that's what they become. When they're attacked, they become that broken child. But it's also the way in. It's the way into someone. When it comes to sex offenders, the majority of which have been abused, right? The sex offender, that is your way in to interview them, broken child. So you have to start talking about their childhood. You take everyone back to their childhood, because that's when the problem started. And then you find out what happened, and then they will revert to the child very quickly. And that is your way in. But you must be the adult and they're the child. But with a sex offender, if you try and combat them using intellect, they'll destroy you, because sex offenders are very deviant. And they want to know everything about you, and they'll turn that against you, you see, to prevent them coming out. They'll always play the victim. But they're not the victim. The child is the victim of them. So when you get people going on about rehabilitation, we must treat everyone with respect to humanity. No. Dangerous move. Yes, at one point you should be doing that, but only once they've admitted what they've done and they put right what they've done, then you can engage in them as a victim. But to treat them initially as a victim, no, don't do it. Don't ever do it. They must put right what they did wrong. They must admit, and they must give you some more information so you can catch others, and then you can work with them as a victim. Then and only then. So the DID, and also with it, there will be a need for deliverance, because there will be an altar that is loyal to the Satanists, because in order for that child to survive, they've got to acquiesce to the Satanism. And sometimes that altar will govern all the other altars. And the moment they think they're going to be set free, that altar will cause self-destruction, which is suicide, or attack on you. And you'll see them change. I know one woman, one of her altars was left-handed, but she was right-handed. One, she had big glasses, but one of her altars had perfect vision, and she would get perfect vision. And they'll change, but you will actually physically see them change. And someone said to me, what load of rubbish? I said, well, it's not. You go out for a night out, you will put on makeup, you will make an effort with yourself, you will wash, you'll do your hair, you will wear nice clothes, and you'll look great. But you drink all night and you don't get any sleep. That's not the same person who looks in the mirror the next morning. You'll be it will take its toll on you, and it's the same with them. It's the same with them, and sometimes you may be able to look very feminine, and other times you might want to look more masculine, or whatever. It's the same with a man can do it, vice versa. So it's not beyond them realms of capability,
Really, this is a protective mechanism that's installed in our body from birth. And it's something that if you haven't experienced that level of trauma, you don't have that comprehension that your body is really capable of surviving in so many different ways, including having the capability of dissociating from your own body, creating this alter personality that can show up in that moment, deal with it, and then revert back inside so you can go on living your normal life.
Exactly. And also, we've got to look at the Satanists themselves. Why do they do it? Well, all Satanists have come from abuse, all of them, right? They're very damaged people. And there's a lot of hate. Where was God? Where was God when I was being abused? How can there be a God? Why would God allow this? And it's a very justifiable argument. And it's one I sometimes struggle to comfort them with. But all I can say, it wasn't God that did this. The devil did this, not God. But once you tune in to this malevolence, you open yourself up And then that's when the possession starts to take place and the influence. There's a guy that has killed many children in the UK. He's an infamous child murderer. And he was being interviewed by the police. And this is where the police need to wake up and start accepting that this goes on. Because as we're interviewing him, I said, "Why'd you do it?" He said, 90% of the time, I'm in control of the devil. But there's that 10% of the time when the devil's in control of me. And there's not much I can do about it. He's given them a nugget of pure, solid gold information, and they just didn't recognise it. They just ignored it. I'm thinking, you fools, he's telling you what's going on with him. The man is possessed. And when it gets in him, what can he do, you know? A pure evil man, pure evil. And evil will reward straight away. It will give them their income, it will give them this, it will give them that, it will give them their sexual partners. It will give them what they desire. But even if you borrowed 1 penny off the devil, you would never have enough money to pay back that loan, you know? And he always wants his debts paid, always. God does things for you because he loves you. The devil always wants something in return, you know? And this is where I started, when I started going down this path of this spiritual battle, this ancient spiritual battle. And I've been present at deliverances. I've had people manifest demons in front of me. I even unwittingly engaged in a conversation with someone who manifested into full possession in front of me. And it was just the most frightening yet bizarrest, and it can be very destabilizing thing. And it was someone who came to help, said, "I want to help you, John. I want to help you on what you do." A very wealthy woman, very opulent lady, you know, well spoken, come from a lot of money. And as time went on, you could, every now and then, she would manifest, usually in times of stress or a lot of enjoyment, you know. She would hiss like a snake. Her tongue would come out, she would hiss like this. And a couple of times I sort of ignored it. I thought, well, you know, that's just whatever it is. And I asked her about it, and she was taking medication. She said, "Oh, it's medication, it makes me convulse." And it wasn't, she was hissing. And then one day I told her she had to leave us all alone, you know, she couldn't be part of what we were doing because it kept occurring and things weren't right. It just was getting it. And she was actually trying to push me away slowly from what I was doing. She wasn't really, she was always there to show support, but her form of support was to push me away, you know, and stop me doing, you know, this charitable work against satanic ritual abuse. And she got very upset at this. And so one day I was doing some work, some manual work, and she came past. And as she walked past me, she said hello, and I said hello back. And then she stopped and she stared at me. And she started hissing, her tongue was out, and she was hissing like a snake. So it literally was like she was choking on something, but her tongue was out. And then her eyes just went black, pitch black. And then something strange was said. She said, "Why do you think you're still here? Why do you think you've not been killed?" Now, there was always been a lot of talk up why I haven't been assassinated. It was even brought up in the Houses of Parliament by a politician. He was surprised I hadn't been taken out by the intelligence services. But the voice wasn't her voice, it was a man's voice. But it was like it was amplified. And I turned around and said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, we've been protecting you." And I said, "Who?" She said, "We've been protecting you. You need to join us and you'll have success. Join us and you'll have success." And I said, "My protection comes from my Lord, my Savior, Jesus Christ." And the moment I said them two words, Jesus Christ, it was like pouring hot water into boiling oil. She screamed, "F Jesus, F Jesus," screaming it, "F Jesus," and she was spitting in my face, "F Jesus." And then I said, who are you? Who are you? And this voice come out, but it was like 3 voices at once, and it said this name, but in the plural. I won't mention the name because I just rather not for the time being, you know. I later checked the name up with a former Satanist who said it's a female god of disruption. And I just prayed. Prayed out loud, and I told whatever was in her that she had no dominion. This child belongs to Jesus Christ. You know, that soul belongs to Jesus. And she fell to the floor, and she was out cold for about a minute before standing up. Later on, I did sit down and talk with her, and she told me, she said her father was abused as a child, was put in a Catholic institution, was going to be a priest, but then ran away and went to Satan. And when she was born, he dedicated her to Satan. And professional lady and everything, but and she had a fantastic life, a life of pure opulence, but she wasn't happy, and there was this thing that she was very reluctant, and she said, when I'm with you, it gets agitated. And it's only ever done it before with an old lady who recognised what was in me, and with you, it doesn't like it, and so it was clearly uneasy in my presence, you know. And sometimes they can't help themselves. They can't. It takes over. This thing takes over, and out it comes, and it's alarming to say the least, you know, when these things happen. So, and I have since seen it on 3 other occasions, you know, now. And I started doing stuff with deliverance ministers, and people get in touch with me, and I put them through to different pastors and ministers that do deliverance. I've sat down with the chief exorcist for the Catholic Church for the United Kingdom. It's very similar practices, you know. I've even spoke to an imam that does deliverance work as well, and so it's all very similar. But for me, you know, it's the name Jesus Christ is very, very powerful, holds a lot of weight, you know, and they don't like it. They seriously don't like it, you know. But the SRA thing, it is very, very real. And then you've just got to break it down. You know, where has this come from? I mean, this goes back to ancient times. It's been referred to, you know, in all the books, all the religious texts. There's this division between good and evil, the fallen ones, you know, and their need to inhabit the souls of mankind and to cause ruin. But the devil is a liar, and he will deceive, you know, and as much as you think you're in control, you're not. It will slowly eat you up and take you over, and it will leave you empty. And there is only one way, and that's the right way, you know. And the influence is everywhere. It's hard, you know, but it tells us that, you know, narrow is the gate, you know, and the other way is wide and open. It's an easy path to do it the wrong way. It's a tough path to do it the right way, you know, but we're only here for such a small time, you know, and it's our duty as adults to make sure that the little ones, the cubs, are protected. This is what we should be doing, you know. We've got to do everything we can. And unfortunately, society is changing. Pornography is everywhere. Perversion is everywhere. This distortion of what is right and wrong has gone. You can't have this conversation with a lot of the 20-year-olds or 30-somethings. They're not interested. You know, their education comes from MTV. They spend the time smoking cannabis. And their value system is upside down. You know, they worship cars and rubbish and crap. They don't look after themselves. They abuse themselves. They eat rubbish. They do this, and they don't realise that they're being seduced at every level. You know, and to say to any of them, "Do you want to come to church and pray?" They're not interested. They laugh. You know, but this is a battle because we're in them times now, and we are slowly seeing it. You know, but what is good is when you get like-minded people. You know, I did an interview, like I said the other day, with Russ Dizdar, who does a lot of good work in America. You know, there's another fellow called Douglas Riggs, that good, strong, solid pastors that go out there and they really take the war to the streets. There's another guy called Ralph Sarchi. He's a Catholic. He's an ex-New York detective who worked with an exorcist for many years, you know, and they're going out there and they're telling the world, you can't ignore this. This is in your face. And if we do nothing, it is the children that will suffer, you know, and sexual abuse of children is high on their agenda. You know, it's one of the main things that they need, that they do, you know, and we've got to be in their way. You know, someone said to me the other day, well, what difference are you going to make? You're not going to stop this. I agree, I'm not going to stop this. It's too big for me to stop. But what I will do in my short time here is I will be a thorn in their side. I will be a breadcrumb in their bed sheets. I'll be a stone in their shoes. I'll be the mosquito bite on their neck. But at least I'm something. At least I am something, even if I'm a minor annoyance to the great bigger picture of demonology. At least I am doing something, you know. But it's out there, and half of it is educating people, educating them, you know, in what's going on, whether that is through voodoo, through witchcraft, the dangers of it, you know, and a lot of occult practices, Ouija and tarot and things like that, you know, that slowly seduce people when they don't really fully understand the full impact of what they're doing. But, you know, I'm getting there.
Well, I appreciate the work that you're doing. It's incredible. Like I said, I might not be exposing this myself and taking care the way that I've been, if not for people like you to bring this to the forefront. Now, to put in perspective for people, how common is Satanism or these cults? Because I think there's also that perception that, oh, that's just, you know, the one-off people that get arrested and it's not that common, but it's really a different story when you start digging into it.
I don't think we'll ever find out. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's covert. You know, it will never reveal what it does statistically, you know. I mean, there's this call for Satanism to become a religion. And if they're a religion, you know, they then qualify for the protection under the Equalities Act. So if I was to say something detrimental against Satanism, which I do on a daily basis, you know, if they become a religion, then I could be done for hate crime. But I don't think they will ever make it a religion officially because they don't want to tell the world what they do, you know.
And that's happening with pedophilia. They're really trying to move that in the direction of legislation too, of lowering ages of consent and normalizing children being involved with these really heinous, you know, pornography and learning about masturbation in kindergarten. They're really pushing those agendas too, along with those same bills of qualifying as a hate crime if you call a pedophile out and relabeling them as a minor attracted person instead of exposing them and potentially treating them as criminals if what they're doing is wrong with children. I know that there's non-offending pedophiles too. Do you think that pedophilia in itself is something that is inherent, or do you think that's also a side effect of abuse?
It's all down to a choice. Yeah. It's like with Satanism, you know, we can say it was under duress. It's the satanic cult made me do this, right? But you had a choice. The child didn't. You know, now, when they engage in Satanism, right, part of the ritual is blood, right? Like I said, blood is energy. Now, everything's done for a reason, so there'll be a sacrifice, and there'll be a blood sacrifice. Now, you openly see this with voodoo when they're sacrificing doves, chickens, rabbits, you know, dogs, cats, whatever it might be. And you can go to these markets, these live animal markets in Benin, for example. You watch Netflix, there's, I think it's called Weird Weekends or something. There's one guy who goes, no, it's the something tourist, the dark tourist. And he goes and he does a voodoo one and he takes part in a voodoo ritual. I mean, he has no idea what he's doing. You know, this man has just no idea and he thinks, oh, it's nothing. Oh, there's a dark side and a light side. No, there isn't. There's an acceptable side to the public and an unacceptable side that they won't show to the public, but they're all the same source. You know, I had one lady come to me, prostitute, And her story sort of corroborates a lot of my investigations on the streets of London. She was a prostitute on the street of London, and she knew all about the runaway children. And one day this group approached her with the offer of free heroin. But so she took it, and they said, you'll get free heroin from now on, but we just need you to come along to a meeting. And she went along to a wealthy area just outside London, and it was a satanic ritual. And she said the moment they went in, there was a baby. They cut the baby's throat, they poured it into a cup, they did all this weird praying, and everyone had to drink from the cup. And she said the moment she drank from that cup, she became instantly psychic. She said, but there wasn't a person there that didn't drink from it. So there's no spectator sport in Satanism. You know, there's an ex-policeman who claims to sort of expose Satanism, but he said he accidentally walked in on a ritual and watched it. You know, he's a liar. He's written it in a book. I can't name him for obvious reasons, but the guy's a liar because he didn't walk in on that and accidentally watch it. He was part of it. That's what he's telling you, you know. So, you know, so they can turn around and say, oh, what could I do? It was a cover. No, you had a choice. And if part of that ritual was also having sex with children, you had a choice. You know, what they do also is they get the children to murder and mutilate the babies that are there for sacrifice. So one woman told me how they'd got some gaffer tape, some heavy industrial sellotape, you know, the masking tape, and they'd taped like a very sharp, like a letter opener type stiletto blade to her hand. She was only 6, and her job, there was 5 babies on an altar, and her job was to stick the blade into the vagina of every single baby and kill it. So what has that done to that woman's mind? You know, she's now a murderer, she's this, she's that, you know. And I've had so many, mainly women, have told me that they've killed children. And one woman said to me, I've killed babies. And I said, explain it. She said, I had to cut more than one baby across the throat, but she was only 6 years old as well. At the same time, I said, well, you never killed them. That wasn't your fault, you know. And they made them do that, you see. So they're caught in this conspiracy of silence. And it's intentional what they're doing. And then there will be the sex rituals, and they know what they're doing. They choose to do this. And we've also got to look at not just those that commit these crimes. Who are those that allow the crimes to be committed? We must look at these. The people that promote these and don't speak out against them. Like I said, in order for the triumph of evil, it takes but good for people to do nothing. So those that deliberately do nothing, they're just as sick and twisted. Those that promote this bizarre nonsense that we're politically seeing now, you know, and we are seeing this with celebrities, especially in the US, that are non-binary in their children and they're this and they're that, you know, they should be boycotted straight away. No one should be buying their records. I mean, how can anyone still buy or even listen to Lady Gaga? How can they? I mean, she clearly is what she is. This is a sick, twisted, demonic individual. How can anyone say there's even any artistic worth in what she's doing? Listen to Mozart, Beethoven, you all know what artistic worth is, not what she's doing. You know, it clearly is promoting Satanism. And we're seeing so many others. I mean, Bob Dylan, now he's under investigation for the rape of a 6-year-old. He clearly, openly said he sold his soul to the devil. So at what point did anyone think that story is going to end well? If you sell your soul to the devil, don't you realise that part of that is the abuse of children? You know, the rape, the death, and what isn't he telling us? What else was he involved in? You know, I can only imagine. And it's the same with many others. They sell the souls. You do not progress anywhere in that industry or others unless your soul is sold, you know, and that comes at a terrible price. And the price is usually not for them. I don't care for them. No one's sold good on them. You know, it's the children, it's those that will be caught up in this. And in order for these people to get where they are, there would have been a blood sacrifice. There would have been a mutilation. There would have been an offering, you know. There would be a torso floating in a river somewhere because they wanted that position of privilege, power, you know. And so they don't impress me, but people have to wake up, you know, and if they don't want to believe it, I don't care. Then you're in a world of trouble. You know, you too have a choice. You can choose to wake up to this abhorrence that is in your face. It's in your face. You haven't got to look far. It's there. They show you who they are, which is, someone said to me, they've got to, and it's true. You know, I've just had someone that's was trying to poison me, right? And he nearly did, but he actually told me what he was doing, and I never listened. He said, the worst thing you can do is eat food at someone's house that you don't know and you haven't blessed, because that's the easiest way to get the devil into you. And before too long, I was very, very ill. You know, I nearly had liver failure. And it was clear what he was doing. He told me, but he told me. I just didn't listen. I was like, oh, yeah, thanks for that. That's a good bit of advice. You know, a nice bloke, you know, a decent guy, very enigmatic, very charming, very, you know, switched on, and, you know, very happy, but the devil's a liar. The devil is a liar. And so, but yeah, we're on the road to hell. We really are. And we either wake up and we're going to have to start insulting people a little bit more and putting them in their place, you know? And so what? But this right to be offended, you know, what a load of nonsense, you know. I just don't get it. I don't get how these people have had so much power, this Hollywood sector people, how, as a world, mainly in Americans, how have you allowed this? And it's the same, we're just as bad in England, you know. How have you allowed this? How can you follow these people? These are perverts, and they clearly are perverted. You know, it's just, I mean, look who you've got in power at the moment, you know, and with all the pictures of him with his hands around little tiny girls' boobs and bums, and really, he's telling you what he is. You can choose to ignore it if you want, but this bloke clearly is what he's showing you what he is. You know, how can anyone be so naive? But we've had it over here. You know, our Prime Minister, our president, if you will, Ted Heath, was an acting Satanist. You know, the killer and raper of children. And he was our Prime Minister. And if anyone speaks out publicly against it, they're taken out. You know, they lose their job or whatever, they get imprisoned or they're killed. You know, I genuinely believe that Princess Diana was dangerously close to speaking out about the royal family being perverts, Satanists, everything else. I genuinely believe that. But they killed her. You know, am I wrong? Well, I don't know. I mean, there was accusations made against all sorts of members of the royal family. You know, I mean, Mountbatten was Prince Charles's uncle, was a paedophile. We look at Prince Andrew now being accused of paedophilia. So we're not far off, you know, the truth here, officially the truth. And this is a royal family. How much have they covered up before this has leaked out? Now, if that was me and you, any little minor infraction would be magnified. Like it says in the Bible, they'll see the speck of dust in your eyes, yet ignore the log in their own. You know? So, you know, that must have been so saturated with allegations about these people that something sooner or later had to get out. But it's up to us if we choose to ignore this. You know, we choose to walk away from this. You know, we're going to pay such a bad price. Now, you're an adult and I'm an adult, but what about the generations of children that have yet to come? Don't we owe it to them to do something? And I call out here, can we start having men being men again? Can our men start to be men once more? You know, come on now. Do you know what I mean? It's got beyond a joke now. You know, I'm not homophobic about this or anything, you know. That's a deeper argument. Maybe there's trauma behind some of it, maybe there isn't, I don't know. It's not for me to say. I worked in the police force with a lot of gays and a lot of lesbians. I've never saw any homophobia directed at colleagues or anything like that, and nor would I engage in any of that. I'm not on about that, you know. But what I'm on about here is the deliberate demasculating of men, you know, downgrading men, you know, the no need for men, and the over promotion of homosexuality. Just keep it in context here, you know. And all we're seeing in the news now in the UK is a man having a baby, whilst the wife, who was a man, won't breastfeed. And you think, why are we even dealing? This is just perverse. Why are we even wasting our time with these people? You know, why don't we start promoting decent people who are bringing up their kids well? You know, and there's one guy I'm helping at the moment. He's come out of prison, a very violent, dangerous man, and all he does is try and make a better life for him, his wife, and his 4 lovely children. He's doing everything a man should be doing: going fishing with the boy, you know, protecting his daughters, making a nice house for his wife. This is what we should be promoting, not dysfunctionality, and we shouldn't be rewarding bad behaviour. You know, we shouldn't be doing it. If people need help, then good. There's plenty of us good people that are willing to help. But if they don't want to help and they agree with what they're doing that's wrong, that's right, then I'm not standing by them. So it's time we've got a grip, because you know there's a song in the UK, you know, the lyrics go, if we tolerate this, then your children will be next. And we are tolerating such nonsense, such bad behaviour, you know, and there's older people, a generation above me, that are tolerating it. They should know better. You know, they come from a more structured and disciplined background. They should know better. Shame on them. Shame on them for weakening their morals, you know, and allowing it to go, you know, unchallenged. So, I mean, I definitely do. I challenge what my children do. If I think this wrong, I tell them. And I tell others that come through my door, and I advise other young people, don't go doing this. Do the right thing. You know, I tell them, grow your own vegetables. I take round tomato plants for them every year. You know, the young couple, you know, in the 20s, grow this, do this. Take your dog for a walk. Take your kids to the park. Do the right thing, you know. Shouldn't be sitting in your front room watching MTV, smoking cannabis during the day. You shouldn't be doing this wrong. Yet society and TV tells us it's good to do it, it's funny to do it. They've got these reality TV shows, and they're showing these kids just sitting around smoking cannabis, drinking, doing nothing, but they're all body beautiful. Well, reality is not like that. You sit around, drink, smoke cannabis and do nothing, you get fat, you get lazy, you start getting health problems, you get mental health problems, you know, you start getting all sorts of complications. You know, that in order to have a good body, you've got to exercise, you've got to get up early, you've got to eat the right foods, you know. It's all going, but you'll feel better for it and you'll live longer. It's a fact, you know, but they don't teach that anymore. You know, someone goes outside and it rains on them, they get wet, you know, they can't cope with it. You know, it's so twisted, it's so wrong. But this is what we need to bring it back, but we need to do the right thing. You know, and we need good family values. You know, we need to educate, proper home economics, proper skills, life skills. You know, otherwise we're going to be in such trouble. We really are, and I've already seen it now. You know, but unfortunately, we're in a time now where gadgets have taken over. You know, iPhones and computer games, and they've taken our children away from us. There's not much we can do about it. You know, I've got one son and he spends all his time on a computer, and it breaks my heart. You know, and it's technology and it's just how it's going to go. I don't think it's a good thing at all. It's a very destructive thing. So, but paedophilia is just part of it. You know, it's just perversion. And if you think that just clicking that little red thing, are you over 18, is going to stop an under 18 watching most extreme porn, I mean, you need putting in a mental institution. You know, you've got 9-year-old children with porn addictions, 9-year-olds, you know, and teenage boys spending all their days masturbating to gangbang sex and things like that, and just ruining their ambitions going and everything. And it's done on purpose. If they didn't want it, it wouldn't be there, you know. But it's how it is now, you know, and there's not much I'm going to be able to do about it. But so I don't really concentrate too much on that, you know. But my thing is exposing the reality of satanic ritual abuse. There have been cases that have come out in the UK. In America, they do recognise it, you know, as an aggravating factor to crimes such as rape and violence. UK, they don't. There's not a separate indictment for anything that is ritualistic connotation towards an offence, which is what it needs. It needs to be nationally catalogued, and it needs to be outlawed, and these people need to be exposed. But it won't, because it's ancient. It goes back too far, especially in this country. It's too ingrained, you know. It really is a massive, massive problem. So bit by bit, we're getting there though. You know, now people know about it. Before, not many people knew about it, you know, but these people want blood.
It's slowly getting exposed. And like you said earlier, the dominoes are slowly falling. So it just takes people understanding the connections, because they isolate all these instances. So people think, oh, it's just Jeffrey Epstein, but he's taken care of, so it's done. It's just this person, just Jimmy Savile, and taken care of, and it's done. And that's where the education comes in. And I really appreciate you, all the work that you've done for all these years. You've paved such a way for not just activists to speak out and learn, but you've really given a platform to survivors, you know, and they're constantly censored. These are the people we should be listening to, people like you, people like Samantha Baldwin, Samantha Brown, Jeanette Archer. These are people with real life experiences that are willing to share, to educate people on how these systems work. And your body of work in itself speaks for itself, and all the things that you've accomplished in your career and all the things that you continue to give. And I appreciate you coming on here. Is there any advice that you would have if people suspect that maybe satanic ritual abuse could be happening to a child that they know, or even abuse? It's really hard to find a pathway to take to get a solution to that. Do you have any advice for people that might suspect something happening and who they could possibly go to?
Until we get a viable alternative, the police need to be told. You know, they need to be told and ensure that they catalogue it properly and write it down properly, because otherwise it will just get downgraded. I mean, I've just managed to get a freedom of information request back from all satanic reported crimes in the UK over the last few years. And there's certain, we're split into 40 different police forces in the United Kingdom. Each one represents a county or a city. And there's certain ones, especially the one I work for, the Metropolitan Police, they claim not to have had any cases of satanic ritual abuse in the last 10 years, where some rural county has reported 2,000, you know. So, and it depends what it is. And look, we've got members of parliament, lobby them, tell the social services, tell the police, share the work, just don't be silenced. You know, evil works in the shadows, it works in the silence. It uses fear, right? Remember that, it uses fear, right? And look, no matter how frightened you are, you think how scared the child is who's being ritualistically abused. You think how frightened they are. So what I say to an adult, put the fear to one side. If you go with fear, then you're feeding into them. They've won already. Drop the fear. That's for the children, you know. And they're frightened. The Satanists are frightened because they know they're getting exposed, right? Or there's a fear of them getting exposed. Anyone who does this, right, is wrong. And also look at the very minor things that people say. You know, there's witchcraft, and people will talk about that, but they won't talk about Satanism. Well, there is no white witchcraft, right? It's all negative. It's all necromancy, right? All them rivers all lead into the same dirty ocean, which is the Leviathan, which is the demonic, you know. When you look at these trolls that have attacked myself Jeanette Archer, Sam, Samantha Brown, and you know, Samantha Baldwin. You know, when you look at these people, they're all freaks. They're honestly, there's one we've just found out who he is. And when you look at this guy, he works for a university, and he looks exactly what he is. And I was looking at a picture of him, and all I see is a very, very damaged little boy. And he puts the most vile stuff out there. And whatever you put out there, they hyper scrutinize, they inform the authorities, they try and take you down any way they can because they're snakes. When I looked at his picture, this bloke puny, he's very dark, very morose. And I had a wave of sorrow came over me when I looked at this guy, and I felt deeply sorry for him because I know he's been hurt as a child. And he's gone to the devil because he obviously thinks God's not going to help him, and he probably gets a lot of comfort in the devil. But the devil will torment him, and he will hurt others, and he will pay for it. And I don't think the man's strong enough to cope with that, because he's obviously a weak man if he's gone to the devil. And the same as the other, they're weak. Satanists are weak people. They prey on the weak, they prey on the vulnerable, and they prey on fear. Do not be frightened of these people. The battle's already been won. Jesus Christ wins this. And I will say to anyone, if you want a way forward, Jesus is a way forward. He protects the children. He's a protector of the children, not Satan. Satan don't protect anyone but himself, you know. And, you know, I pray for all those that have been through it. I pray justice for Samantha Baldwin, and that she gets the children back. If anyone wants to ever come across a case of pure injustice and wretchedness, look at what that poor woman and her 2 children have been through. You Google it, Samantha Baldwin, you'll see it, and the woman needs as much encouragement and support as she can. Can we pray for our brother Wilfred Wong, who's looking at possibly life imprisonment for attempting to save a child that may well have been satanically abused. Again, I've got to be careful of my words because it's not come out fully in public. So it looks like it was a rescue attempt on a child who was being abused, and Wilfred's now in prison. This is a good man. This is a man of God. I've known Wilfred a long time, and all he's ever done is dedicate his life to servitude towards God and exposing Satanism. No one has single-handedly done more to expose Satanism than Wilfred Wong. No one. It's a good man, and he's coming under great attack at the moment. And again, just look at those who attack us, and then they'll show you who they are. By their fruit shall you know them. They're showing you exactly who they are. You know, but you know, I welcome any platform. I'm very grateful of you having on my show. A lot of the stuff I do, a lot of the stuff I do now, I do it very covertly. I'm flat out busy. I'm working on something so massive at the moment, but I will never ever go back to live podcasting and all that because of the vile attacks that I came under. And you can't trust them. They alert the authorities. They disrupt everything. So I've learned a big lesson. You know, the lesson was keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, but keep working. And I've never been so busy. But no one will know what I'm up to. But it'll come out in the national press soon because we're working on something very, very big, and it will expose a lot of cover-ups when it comes out.
I'm really excited to hear about it. Now, for people who do want to contact you or just learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's Jon Wedger, so it's Jon Wedger, Wedger Foundation, all one word. It's got its own website, it's got its own YouTube channel, but it's Jon Wedger Foundation at gmail.com, and you can email me through there. You know, I can't guarantee I'll get back. I tend to get back to most people. I'm limited as to what I can and can't do, but if I can help, I will help. I'm in the process of helping someone whose member of their family was found decapitated, and we're trying to get some sort of closure and support for this girl. You know, so there's stuff I can do, and I can put you in touch with people. The people are being tormented, there's certain pastors I can put them in touch with. you know, if they feel that they're under attack. I've got contacts in America that can help, but again, I'm limited. But you know, but if anyone wants to get in touch with me or give me information, you know, please do, please do. But you know, the answer's out there. People know what's going on. Just speak out. Don't be frightened. Just speak out. The fear is with those that did it and those that are having it done to them. The fear shouldn't be yours. Don't be scared to speak out.
Thank you so much, Jon. I really appreciate your
All
time.
right.
I'd love to have you back on again, time permitting, of course, whenever you have some
Of
to
course.
talk a little bit more. But thank you so much for everything that you shared today. You're an absolute earth angel and such an inspiration for people like me. And I know I speak for so many when I say thank you for everything that you're doing for the children.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and I keep going on to say this is what I've just been doing. My recent project, I've just built this for someone, you know, all come out of my pocket, donations, whatever. And, you know, there's other little things, you know, I'll do, and I do food parcels and all sorts. So I do whatever I can, I will do it. And I enjoy doing it, you know, but I'm just, for now, I'm very quiet. So I haven't gone away. I just don't need to tell the world what I'm doing anymore. But I'm still here. And hopefully I'll have a book coming out soon. So.
Ooh, awesome. I can't wait for that. Oh my goodness. Yes, I can't wait to hear more about that. Well, everybody listening, I'm going to link all Jon's information in the show notes. So connect with him. He has a whole library of videos on YouTube. He's done tons of interviews, huge interviews where he gave and divulged even more information than he did here. So if you want to learn more, support him, support his organization. I always say go directly to people helping activists or directly to survivors. We can't always trust the people that say that they're helping. As Jon was saying, a lot of people that we wouldn't expect to be involved are. Go right to the source, give your money and attention and time to things, people, and causes that are actually taking action and who actually care. So share this episode. The best way that we can help survivors, activists, bringing awareness to Jon's work is to share. This really starts grassroots. This isn't something we're ever going to see covered on the mainstream media. This is something we have to build and we have to share. So even if it's just one person that you know might watch and find value, they might pass it on to another person or two people. And that's really how we spread awareness of things like crimes against children, satanic ritual abuse, child prostitution, and all these other crimes that are being committed and not given the proper attention. So, Jon, thank you again for being here.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys next week.